So how did I get into EFT? So in this video, I'm going to share with you a bit of my story, how I discovered EFT, what made me decide to focus on EFT, and kind of how I ended up in this situation now where I'm teaching, practitioner, and also making videos like this. So I've been thinking about this quite a bit, trying to explain it because, it's like a 20-year process, or at least 20 years journey. And there's really like three monumental periods which really contributed to my pursuit of EFT. The first one, when I was growing up. So I grew up in Brisbane, Australia, and my mother was a nurse. So my mum worked in ICU units, and she was in the cardiac area. So people, heart attack, heart surgeries, things like that. And she used to work night duty a lot. So on their feet all night long. And so over the years, her health started to be challenged, started to deteriorate, particularly her feet, because they're standing all day, and basically the structure of her feet started to be compromised. And I remember thinking that, she's in hospital, she's around doctors, they're the best people. Like if you want, she's in the best environment with the best options, so everything's going to be fine. So sometime later, I'm still quite young, I'm moving into teenage years now, and the options they're giving her is invasive surgery. They're going to open her up, put bolts and stuff in her feet. And I just remember at the time going, there's got to be a better way, right? That can't be the best option. But of course, no one's going to listen to me. I'm just a young kid. So anyway, she goes off and gets the surgery done, listens to what the doctors and everything, and it just really knocked her around. I remember she was in a wheelchair for 6 months. It just put a lot of pressure, and it worked for a while. And this is fast forward a bit, but it does cause ongoing problems, right? Inflammation, stiffness in the joints, stuff like that. So anyway, now I'm like teenage years. I'm like 16 years old. And so I was a little bit disheartened. I was a little bit off-put. Not conscious. I wasn't conscious at this point that I was disappointed by Western medicine. I was just like, there's got to be a different way. That's kind of the depth of my thinking. And so it was around the same time that I got swept up in the techno dance music scene that was sweeping through Australia in the 90s. And, that really, I describe it like it woke me up, right? Got into LSD, we got into ecstasy, things like this, and we would basically be in a warehouse or some kind of abandoned building. And then eventually became more doof parties, we call them in Australia, which is we get a big sound system, we go out to the bush, right? It's usually in the forest or somewhere deep in the bush somewhere. And usually, these parties like 200, 300 people max. And we'd stay in the bush and we'd doof, doof, doof. So the techno music, doof, doof, doof. And we'd just stay up dancing all night. It was amazing, right? It was incredible times. And, when the sun rose, we're in the middle of the bush. We're in the middle of this amazing forest, surrounded by nature, very transformational, very inspirational stuff. And also at these parties, there was a strong psychedelic influence coming from India. There's a place in India called Goa, and out of Goa, there was a sound called Goa trance, and it had a very psychedelic flavor to it. And so this was the sound that were coming into these doof parties, this Goa sound. And so with it were all these kind of symbolism of Hindu gods, psychedelic, mushrooms and all this sort of stuff, and altars and Shiva, the dance of Shiva. So that really started to awaken me to this idea of yoga. And basically through that period, I started getting into yoga. I wasn't reading the books from school. I started reading the autobiography of a yogi. I read the Bhagavad Gita, things like this. And what I realized through those years and through my own exploration is that the yogis had a very profound understanding of the human being, not only spiritually, but also medically, right? And so that just tied into my mum's experience, or the Western medicine experience. It was like, to me, I was like, oh, there's got to be a better way. And then that's when yoga kind of came into my life. I was like, oh, this seems like a better way, right? This seems like a healthier way. So that's what really kicked me into the Eastern arts, if you want to call it that, the Eastern philosophies. And so then I started traveling. I was doing yoga. I started doing meditation retreats. I ended up in China, right, without any qualifications or anything. It was just, in those days, you didn't need anything. And that's when I got exposed to Taoism, acupuncture, Chinese Buddhism, Kung Fu, Tai Chi, all this cool stuff, right? And this was what I was open to, and this was what I was looking for as a better option to what I had seen with Western medicine, for example. So that was the big pivot. That's when it all sort of started. And I was about 17, 18 years old that I really took off and became very interested in the East. After I came back from China, I started studying massage and then eventually acupuncture as well. And it was in acupuncture college that I got exposure to EFT tapping for the first time. It was actually a video by Gary Craig on YouTube. And because I was already studying the meridians, I was already studying Chinese medicine, EFT was not a big jump for me. Right? It was like, it made sense. It was like, oh yeah, of course, right? But for some people, I can see that it's a big jump. Right? If you're coming from like a Western trained mind, Western science, and then to EFT, it's quite a big jump. But I was already doing yoga, I was doing Chinese medicine, and then EFT. It just adds to it. It's not a big jump. So that was when I got exposed to it, and I knew it was good. But because I'd invested, 4 years of education, all this money, all this time into acupuncture, I was always like, nah, acupuncture is my primary modality, and everything else is on the side. So that's what I did, and then I was continuing to study different things, applied kinesiology, etc. But then fast forward a little bit, I'm finished school and I'm treating one of my friends. And my routine usually was 20 minutes of massage, half an hour acupuncture needles, and that's it. At the end of the treatment I gave with her, she got up off the table and says, "Oh, Michael, I've been biting my nails a lot recently. Is there anything you can do for that?" And at the time I was like, oh, acupuncture. I was like thinking, how can acupuncture help? And actually at the time I was finding that acupuncture, particularly with mental emotional stuff, it's actually very slow going, unfortunately. That's, in my opinion, that's my experience, is that acupuncture tends to be really fast reactive for sore knees, sore backs, musculoskeletal injuries. But when it comes to things like depression, anxiety, feeling lost, acupuncture works, but it takes a lot of, repetitive treatment. Like every day, ideally, you could treat someone every day for like 2-3 weeks, and then there would be a noticeable change. But if you're just treating once a week or once every 2 weeks, I found it was very slow going. It wasn't very fast. Didn't stick. That's how I describe it. It doesn't stick like that. So my friends asking me about these nails, and I said, oh, all right, well, what if we just try EFT? So I knew the basic recipe, and we only had 5-10 minutes. So that's what we did. I just took her through 5-10 minutes, even though I'm biting my nails. And it could be anxiety. That's okay. We did 1 or 2 rounds. That was the end of that. And I didn't think anything of it. I left. And then 2 weeks later, I see her at like a social gathering, and she runs up to me and goes, Michael, you know that thing we did for my nail biting the other day? And I was like, yeah. how'd it go? And she said, oh, I'm doing it less by like 60%. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. And it's stuck, right? So for 2 weeks, it had reduced the behavior by 50-60%. We did it in 5 minutes. And I didn't even know really what I was doing, right? So that was my first real clinical feedback about how powerful this thing could be. So then I started to play with EFT, bring it into my clinic. So I'd do the massage, acupuncture, and then I'd do some tapping with people at the end. But I found that just tapping on the end wasn't going deep. It was just sort of, superficial levels, but it was still giving some result. So that was my second really big moment where I was like, oh, wow, this EFT is potentially faster, and it's effective, and it sticks better than the acupuncture that I'm doing. So from there, I continued to do acupuncture for many years, actually. I started becoming a teacher. I did more trainings in EFT. I did one in Melbourne. I did one overseas as well. And basically, this is a period where I was just skilling up. I studied pretty much full time for 9 years, something like that. Finished with bachelor and all these other side, like applied kinesiology and stuff like that. And I became a teacher as well. So I started teaching at the college where I qualified. And then eventually, a few years later, the next big moment was I was making enough small income from selling my books and everything online that I realized I could travel again. I could travel to Thailand and actually stay there by a one-way ticket. And that was kind of my dream from a very young age since I first went traveling. So that's what I decided to do. I sold everything. I closed up the clinic. I was teaching yoga. I stopped teaching yoga. And me and my partner at the time, we flew overseas, went to Thailand, went to China, some other places. And that started a different chapter of my life. And this time I wasn't operating an acupuncture clinic. I didn't have a massage table. I didn't, I had needles in my bag, but, I wasn't operating commercially. And I was still doing acupuncture here and there, but nothing really took off and I couldn't really commit to it. I'm in a foreign country. And then some years later, I was in Pai in northern Thailand, and I remember I was treating one of my friends, and he was late, and I'd set up this space, and I put all this effort in, and I was also did this other course online, and it was kind of in that moment when I realized, let's do EFT. Let's pivot to EFT. I don't need materials. I don't need any equipment. I don't need to rent a space. I can do it online. I can do it a person sitting down. I can do a person sitting up. There's just so many, it just makes it so much easier. And by this time, I'd already seen it working so well on myself in multiple situations. I'd already started running workshops on it. And something clicked in my brain. This is like 2016 by this time. And that's when I shifted. I was like, all right, I'm going to put acupuncture officially on the side, and I'm going to do EFT full time, or just full power. So that's when I started doing it. I started running workshops. I started treating people, and originally for little to no money, just to get experience. Then after a while, I put together my own training course. I got it accredited through the IICT, International Institute of Complementary Therapists. And that's basically it. Then I was just full power into EFT. And I still practice other modalities, but they're kind of on the side now. They're more complementary. And the other cool thing about EFT is that it's very easy to teach it, right? Comparative to something like applied kinesiology, it's quite complex. And applied kinesiology, you kind of need charts, and there's all these systems in place. But again, I'm kind of traveling, so EFT, I don't need charts, I don't need a room, I don't need all this stuff. And it works just as well, right? So that's basically it, And then I decided to make videos about EFT just to share it, because it's so simple again. And that's basically the whole process in a nutshell to where I am today. And that's why EFT's sort of taken the spotlight for me. Like I mentioned, I do other practices and I've done other trainings, and I'm actually doing a training and a master's degree in counseling at the moment in the part-time, just to give me more of a well-rounded understanding about the psychological sciences and other modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy and all these things. Because at some point I thought, oh, maybe I'm just narrow-minded. I'm too biased in EFT because I'm not aware of the other modalities as much. And so, but the more I've been studying the master's degree in counseling and doing things like CBT, it's actually made me more fortified and more determined with EFT, because it still rises to the top. In my experience and my observations, it's still one of the simplest, one of the fastest ones. It works because many of the talk therapies, they're purely cognitive. There's no physicality to them. So EFT is different, whereas when we're tapping, we're actually adjusting the nervous system, the physicality, and being cognitive. So that's why I think it's more powerful. It works better in a lot of cases. Because you have to have more dimensions. You have to have at least the body and the mind together, and things stick better. If you're just working one dimension, say just pure cognitive processing, I just don't think it holds that well. In my opinion, it just doesn't hold. It's a lot of work, and it's a very long and sort of laborious process. But EFT is fast, in my experience. So yeah, so that's why I'm still doing EFT, and that's why I'm trying to train more people in it, get people more competent in it, more confident, because there's really no limit to what you can use EFT on. And I've been doing it for a long time, and it's still always finding new things to do, new practices, and new ways of using it. So yeah, I think we're still in the early stages of this EFT, or this mind-body medicine therapy, and because the science now is coming out, it's even it's verifying it, and I'm really into the science aspect. I'm a bit skeptical, or a bit hesitant to take on modalities that don't or would not stand up to some kind of scientific process. But EFT, I know, does, and it shows, and it does. So EFT is scientifically backed, as well as dancing in the esoteric realm and the energy realm, which I think is fantastic. And I think we're at the beginning of this new frontier in psychotherapy, and that's why I'm here. That's what my work is about now, is riding that wave and being a part of that change. Because unfortunately, it seems that humans are getting more anxious and more depressed, and we need practices like EFT to help us sort of come out of it. So that's it. Hopefully that's helpful. Again, there's a lot more to this story. There's like a 20-year storyline to this. Maybe in other videos, or maybe in a book one day, I can explore more details. But that's kind of to give you an overview of how I got into it, where it sort of started. Like I said, it was kind of a natural progression from the age of 17, 18. I just got pivoted and redirected into alternative, I don't like that word, but you know what I mean, not the mainstream approach. I became more interested in other options. So yeah, thank you for listening. Hopefully it was entertaining, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.